5 things we can take away from the new and first Nick Caley press conference with Demeco Ryans. This is the Texans Better Talk Show. Don't forget to like and subscribe for daily content. If you didn't know, Nick Caley just had his first press conference with Demeco Ryans. And the first thing I kind of want to get into is actually something Demeco Ryans said. He was asked what was different about hiring a play caller now versus 2 years ago when you were first becoming a head coach. And listen to what he says.
This time, this process, it's a little easier. I think knowing what I was looking for, and knowing what to look for after being a head coach for 2 years now, and seeing how we operate here, and it was an easier, process for me.
I think this is super interesting because it almost sounds like Demeco Ryans hired Bobby because he was his friend, and I know that's maybe not. There was probably a little bit of interviewing. Obviously, he did search around and look for other candidates, one being Cliff Kingsbury, who's very successful with the Commanders. But it just sounded like, honestly, surprisingly, Demeco Ryans didn't really know what he was doing hiring an offensive coordinator and kind of just stuck with Bobby because that was his friend. Like, that's what I got from that. They obviously knew each other really well in San Francisco, and Demeco later on in the interview went to say all the best for him, and it would suck to let him go, yada, yada, yada. But just really kind of an interesting take when describing what was different. And he just made it sound like he didn't really know what he was doing the first time. So that was kind of the first interesting thing. But now let's start looking and let's start listening to what Nick Caley had to say. Nick Caley was asked, you've spent time with Bill Belichick in New England, you've spent time with Sean McVay, and a lot of times as fans, we like to call, that's the Shanahan tree, that's the McVay scheme. He was basically asked, what's the scheme going to be for the Houston Texans? And take a listen to what he had to say.
Yeah, it's going to be Houston's. It's going to be our scheme based on what we do, and I don't say that to throw any curveballs. It really is. I mean, my history dating back to when I first got into the National Football League under Coach Belichick is we were going to be a game plan team. If that meant we were going to run duo and gap schemes and run the ball 45 times to win the game, then that's what we were going to do. If we had to run more perimeter plays, wide zone, and we felt that was going to give us the edge, we were going to do that. It was all going to be based. We were going to ask our guys to do what they do well, but it was going to be based on what we do to help us win. And at the end of the day, we want to win, and that's priority for us.
So this is also kind of interesting. You hear the term Houston scheme, which doesn't really tell you anything. But I think the point he was trying to make, and he does reference this several times in the interview, was that we're going to figure out what we're good at, and then that's going to be our scheme. This kind of gets contradicted, though, if you watch this next clip where he kind of starts talking about players' skill sets. Here, just take a listen really quick.
And as a first-time coordinator, to answer your second part of the question, really excited to get an opportunity to evolve this scheme and put, it's not going to be my spin. It's going to be what's best for our players. And it's always going to be what's best for our players. No, we're not pounding a square peg into a round hole. It's going to be based on the strengths of our quarterback, the players, and the guys on this team. So that's what it will always be, designed around.
On one hand, you say we're going to do whatever it takes to win. We're going to run the ball 45 times if we have to, or we're going to pass the ball 45 times if we have to. On the other hand, he's saying, well, we need to do what our players are good at, which I'm assuming is not everything, right? Players aren't usually good at every single scheme. So there was a little bit of kind of disconnect, and this could all be just him, trying to be positive and be up there and say the right things in front of the podium, but definitely kind of a conflicting thing that he kind of brought into the presser that was kind of ironic because he said two different things. He said, we're going to do whatever it takes to win, but we're also going to only do what we're good at. So I thought that was interesting as well. Also, one of Nick Caley's more bizarre answers came about the tight end group. He basically was asked, we've made the investment at the tight end position, which basically called out Dalton Schultz without calling him out. And then they said, they asked, what can you do to maximize that tight end position?
Yeah, I love tight ends. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased there, but I think we got a great group of guys, smart, tough, competitive. And, in my history, we've used a bunch of different guys in different roles, and I like tight ends.
That was definitely the most bizarre answer Nick Caley gave all day. Didn't really feel like he had an answer. I don't know if maybe he felt kind of, off because of the fact that Dalton Schultz was kind of called out. Or it kind of also sounds like he just hasn't even looked at the tight end room, which I would assume is not possible if you're the offensive coordinator now for this team. Maybe it's too early. He said, we're going to attack it in the spring. But really starts to wonder, is Dalton Schultz savable with Nick Caley? Because Nick Caley was basically like, yeah, there's a lot of competitors. There's a lot of people in there. And I love tight ends. And it's like, yeah, who doesn't love tight ends? But there was nothing super tangible. I get it's early, and I don't want to read too much into his first presser. And I just thought, as a tight ends coach and as a person who loves tight ends, he would have a better answer on how to improve the tight end position, because the question that the reporter is getting at is, hey, we've made investment, like significant investment. Dalton Schultz is paid like a top 10 tight end in the league. And Nick Caley's response wasn't super amazing to that, being a tight ends coach with the Rams. So yeah, I just thought that was another interesting aspect of the presser. Also, he was asked about the O-line. How can the O-line protect Stroud more efficiently? Listen to what he had to say about that.
Yeah, I think it all starts up front, obviously, and it's really all 11. I mean, we all got to be in sync, and I think protection starts, obviously, with communication, with trust and communication, cohesiveness up front, and really having clear, rules in the protection system. So we're gonna, we'll be going through that process. Obviously, I got a, history with Cole, dating back to my time in New England. He was our offensive line coach, and I coached the tight end, so I have a really good working relationship and a level of trust with Cole. He's a very good football coach, and I'm excited to go through this process with him.
So yeah, I didn't read too much into this. Obviously, just kind of giving us some basics on how protection works. A lot of communication. He mentioned that you have to stop the pressure inside at first and then out. So A-gaps first and then off the tackles, which makes sense. I really kind of just thought it was a more generic answer. I honestly thought he was kind of surprised at how many questions he was getting asked about the O-line. And I'm sure he has his own evaluation in his head on our offensive line, and it should be a very low evaluation. But there were probably like 5 or 6 questions directed about the protection and about the offensive line towards Nick Caley. He made sure to say, you've got to stop that inside pressure first, but he also said it's an 11-person thing. Quarterback's going to be on the same page. You have to be seeing the field through the same lens. So I think what he said, and yeah, even to the receivers and the tight ends who chip. So not a super insightful answer, but just more kind of talk about the offensive line that was brought up. One thing I did like, though, is he didn't really compliment the offensive line. He said a couple of times in the interview that he needed to work on fundamentals, and it starts with fundamentals and figuring out what they do well. So that's good. I do think he's fighting an upward battle, though, with that offensive line. And the last takeaway is directed towards the wide receivers. He gets asked basically, hey, you have Mechie, you have Hutchinson, you used Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. When you drafted him, they weren't really seen as big stars coming out of college. How can you apply that to Xavier Hutchinson and Mechie? And what do you look for with them? So take a listen to what he said.
Yeah, I think you put them in positions to have success, to surround, be in position to do what they do best. And I think the spring is also an opportunity for us to, you experiment with routes, and you see what guys do, and you refine certain skills. And I think everybody's got a little bit different skill set, and try to maximize those guys and put them in the best positions to have success to help the team. And that's what I'll try to do here with this staff. We got a great staff. We got great players that are, going to work hard, and we'll go attack it here once we get the guys back.
And again, just kind of the more generic answer. Obviously, he's not going to single out a player on his first press conference. I understand that. But really just back to the concept of understanding the fundamentals, doing all the little things right, figuring out what routes they're good at was another key thing that he mentioned, and maybe towards the blocking assignments and stuff like that. He could have alluded to that. So yeah, that was pretty much the takeaways. Let me know what you think about Caley. Honestly, I like him as a candidate. I like his personality. He reminds me a lot about Sean McVay. If you just turn back the dial a little bit, he just speaks like Sean McVay, very animated, very in tune. There were other parts of the interview that I left out, or the presser, so if you want to see that, go check the Texans channel. But those are just some kind of takeaways. I think he's a good hire, but let me know what your first thoughts are, and if you think he's the right guy for the Houston Texans. I will see you all in the next one, man. Peace out.